Hi, I'm Sean Spear, Project Director at the Ontario 360 Project here at the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. As viewers may know, we've been releasing a series of policy briefs on issues of interest to the province of Ontario. In the past several weeks, we've covered a range of issues, including intergovernmental fiscal relations, social assistance reform, foreign credential recognition, and so on, all with the help of trying to inform and shape policymaking here in the province of Ontario. And this week's no different. Today we released a new policy brief by Brian Dijkema, Vice President of Cardis, a public policy think tank, and a policy expert in the areas of apprenticeships and skills trades. Today, Brian just finished a presentation to a group of policymakers, including members of the political arm of the government and the Ontario Public Service, as well as members of the University of Toronto community and a broader network of stakeholders on his analysis and recommendations. And I'm thrilled to have him here with me now. Brian, thanks for your contribution. Maybe let's just start with the fundamental question. Why should viewers, why should Ontarians, why should policymakers care about the apprenticeship system and the skilled trades?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. There are, I think, two key reasons. One macro, one a little bit more close to home. On the macro front, data show that Ontario is having a real hard time getting the skilled trades to build the projects that the province needs to grow its economy. So whether you're talking about a study from the Business Development Bank of Canada that said that 65% of companies that are suffering from skilled labor shortages are 65% more likely to be slow growth companies. You hear statements from OPG, which is the power literally the place that powers the province. They've got two of the biggest projects in Canada, huge projects that are global sized projects. And their biggest risk is lack of skilled trades. They can't build the electricity that we need to power our homes, our phones, our industry. Real challenge. Metrolinx, which moves people in the GTHA, which is just sort of the heart of the job creation in Ontario and a major engine of its economic engine, also recognizes that the key to sustainability of its projects are labor market. It's a problem not just in the GTA, it's a problem in Southern Ontario, it's a problem in Eastern Ontario, Ottawa, Northern Ontario, lots and lots of challenges. And what that is a brake on our economy. We need our economy to grow. If we want to have higher standards of living and so on and so forth to pay for our social programs. And there's a brake on it. And it's a brake that we've known about for years, but it's almost so slow and so gentle that we're barely noticing it. But nonetheless, it's slowing us down. And so we need to get that brake off of the wheels so that we can continue to grow and continue to go. That's the sort of macroeconomic side of it. The other is that there are challenges for people's lives, for their actually work lives. The fact that people who face challenges in our modern labor market environment, people who aren't finishing high school, are faced with one of the most challenging to navigate systems, and as such are not finishing and not completing. And I think as a part of that, that means that people aren't getting the satisfying jobs, the well-paying jobs that they need to raise families, to help support local charities and all the rest of that stuff. So there's a macro side of it, but it has real effects on individuals, their families, and their communities.
It's such an important observation to make, and it's something I know that not only did you emphasize in the paper, but in today's presentation, that we're being squeezed in effect in two ways. One is the aging demographic, so baby boomers are leaving the skilled trades. And secondly, we're not replacing them, in part because only a small percentage of the population is pursuing trade certification. Even amongst those who are, the completion rate here in the province of Ontario is pretty abysmal. Less than 50% of those who entered the skilled trades training actually completed and obtained their certificate. And it's a combination of these two forces that's producing the skilled labor shortage that you described, and in so doing, precluding these people from higher wages, higher earnings, and ultimately better lives. Maybe just before we get into your recommendations, which I think are so important, why don't you just give a sense of some of the progress or developments that we've seen on this front? This is not a static policy file. It's an area of dynamic change.
Right, so you're right. It's actually been one of the things we said. We've known about this problem for some time. There's been lots of changes. I think with this government responded to one of the earlier papers we put together and has actually put forward some very bold structural changes that can actually shape the environment in a positive way going forward. I'll just mention a couple of them. One is the movement towards and I think this one may be among the most important, is the movement towards leveraging and expanding existing training capacity. So Ontario has tremendous training capacity. There's lots of training going on in employer shops, but particularly in unionized environments where there's associations on the employer side and on the union side that contribute to training and are actually very successful. The rates of completion are higher. That's a wonderful system. I think the problem is that it's so narrow. It only affects a certain portion of the entire workforce. The government's move to incentivize and build the structures which would allow other employer associations, other groups to form and provide that same type of collective response to some of these challenges, I think is a game changer. I really do. I think if the government could do that, and if industry could respond by collectively working together rather than seeing themselves completely as competitors, and we had a plurality of those collective options, I think we would be moving more towards the gold standard, which is the type of German system. So that would be one. Another one would be the movement, or at least the government signaled that it wants to move towards an environment where skilled trade certificates are recognized on the basis of competencies. So currently, if you're in a skilled trade, you have to complete the whole program to be given the certificate which recognizes you as competent to do the job. That's great for those who complete, but as you said, only 47% complete. That's less than half. A lot of people have said that means that that's a failure of those individuals or a failure of the schools or what have you. I think it's actually a failure of the system as a whole. And the government's movement towards recognizing publicly and providing credentials for the work, the training that is done, is a move in the right direction. Why? I think mainly because what it does is it enables employees who finish, say 3 out of the 5 years to leave. And sometimes people have to leave for a variety of reasons, life circumstances, what have you. But they leave not with nothing, which is the current case, but they leave with a portable, publicly recognized credential that they can bring to other jobs in other places, and it increases their bargaining power.
One thing you observed in your presentation today that I thought was so important is that we presently, as you say, have this all or nothing model. We have poor completion rates, which everybody accepts. It's been the subject of Auditor General reports and a priority set by governments of different political stripes. And yet, we've not really moved the dial much with respect to improving those completion rates. Regrettably, though, it's the way we've come to conceptualize this. How can we improve completion rates? And I think what you're saying is, yes, of course, we should continue to advance reforms that can improve completion rates for those who enter apprenticeships and ultimately to help them get their certificates. But we need to think about it a bit differently. For those who aren't completing, how do we help them find a way to bring the skills that they have acquired and competencies they have acquired into the marketplace where they can be recognized and utilized, especially in light of the labor shortages that you talked about off the top. Yeah. So maybe just talk a bit about this shift and the steps that would need to be taken to kind of operationalize what the government thus far has mostly signaled.
On the skill sets,
yes.
That's everything. Yeah, I think the one thing to note is that is to address the people who are going to be quite concerned about what does this mean? Does it mean we're actually going to move towards a widget approach to the skilled trades, right? So you're competent at doing one thing and that's it.
Yes.
That's not the model we're advocating. And in fact, I don't think that's the model that's helpful. What we're trying to do is understand already within the given system there are graduated steps. Mm-hmm. So there's first year apprentice, second year apprentice, third year, fourth, et cetera, until you get that journey person ticket. The problem is not that pathway itself necessarily.
Yes.
The problem is that you only get publicly recognized for finishing it.
Yes.
So if you're in the first year, there's a variety of things that you learn on almost any trade, whether it's like learning how to read a tape measure, dealing just basic safety things. There's all kinds of things that are important for a variety of things. But if you quit or if you have to get out of it, there's no way for you to do that. So the government could operationalize it if it wanted to start and be sort of slow, just by looking at it, not revolutionary, I mean, in that sense.
But incremental.
Incrementally, if it wants to do that incrementally, it could take what it does already and simply provide credentials recognition for the skills that are already within the existing sets.
So it would, in effect, shift to a cumulative system.
Exactly.
So by the end, you would have your certificate, but
Correct.
on the pathway, you'd be acquiring competencies that the market could recognize and value.
Exactly, and in fact, there are examples of that already within the trades. So, for instance, in the paper I noted a gas technician. There are 3 levels for a gas technician. There's one which enables you to do certain things, like for instance, setting up a kitchen stove, and then it moves up and up and up to the point where you can deal with massive high pressure gas, that type of thing. That's exactly the direction that the whole system of trade should be looking to do. Because what it recognizes is that there are different steps, different competencies, different levels of difficulty, and as you move up, you also have something to take along with you,
yes,
and something that you can also use in your bargaining relationship with your employer.
Yes.
Right.
I'm sensitive that we've kept you a lot, but I'd be remiss if we didn't cover 2 issues that I think are important for Ontario policymakers and for our viewers. The first is the question of the New West Partnership Agreement. There's been some talk about Ontario possibly joining the New West Partnership Agreement, which is an intergovernmental trade agreement between our western provinces, which would in effect open up the Ontario market for journey people to come from the West and work in Ontario and vice versa.
Yeah.
Do you want to just talk about why you think the Ontario government should pursue membership in the New West Partnership Agreement, and why you think some of the arguments against it don't hold up?
Sure. I'll start with on this particular file, construction, for instance, which one of the 4 groups in the skilled trades. Research by StatsCan and others have shown that it's one of the worst internal traders. It doesn't do any internal trade, and that's a problem. We should be our companies should be able to move back and forth and sort of bring their expertise and sort of advantage to other places. But I think most importantly, we've got a lot of unemployed people, for instance, in Alberta right now. A lot of people working construction trades, industrial trades, and they're unemployed because of the challenges with the oil sand, the cyclical nature of that. At the same time, Ontario needs skilled trade persons. We talked about the need for industrial journey persons at OPG, at Go Transit, at any number of things. We're booming here. We don't have enough people, and there are people in Alberta who need jobs. It strikes me that providing a clear and open pathway for them to come in and do those jobs, to feed their families, to provide their education, all the rest of that stuff, and the fact that we can actually release that brake on our that itself should be a reason to pursue it. And the fact is, politically, there's an opportunity. I know that the Western premiers have said we're open to having Ontario join. And as I said in the presentation, like the premier should be running into the open arms of the Western premiers, like Rachel McAdams into the arm of Ryan Gosling in The Notebook. It should happen right now. The people who are worried about the losses that often accompany trade agreements, right? There are always costs, there's always gains and losses. I say a couple of things. One is Ontario has been a huge beneficiary of one of the best trade agreements ever. The former NAFTA, the USMACA, or whatever we're going to call it right now. One of the best trade agreements in history, an incredible one, and one that we've benefited from. And yes, there have been losses, but the gains have been much more. In the case of the New West Partnership, Ontario is the big player, right? Ontario is the big player. And I think it's a case for us to say, yes, we aren't going to gain as much as Alberta or Manitoba or Saskatchewan or British Columbia, or even if we looked east into that, we won't gain as much, but we're still going to gain. And not only that, I think there's a case in which we say, we're Canadians. There's no reason why we should have higher barriers between provinces than we do with our neighbors who are of a different nationality to the south of us.
Yeah, well, it's an important issue, and hopefully we'll see progress. As you say, particularly in the skilled trades, the Ontario labour market is screaming at the top of its lungs for workers, and it just seems regrettable that we have a ready supply of skilled trades workers in parts of Western Canada. For whom we've placed a barrier for their participation. Just the last issue. This is a really important one, and it's the question of how do we build pathways for those who may not choose university or college, but for whom involvement in an apprenticeship and ultimately the skilled trades could be transformational. The evidence is that on average, those with a skilled trade certificate earn 30% more than those with high school or less. And so if the Ontario government was seized by the question of how do we pull some of those who are not going to pursue university or college into an apprenticeship or skilled trades to change their lives and improve our labor market challenges in this area, what can and should the Ontario government do as part of that agenda?
Yeah, that is the real question. I think it's important to start looking at what we have now, and then say where could we go. What we have now is a system that is diffuse and dissipated. So whereas if you're going into college or university, there's a clear pathway backed up by a vertically integrated system and tons of money and lots of people focusing their entire attention on it to get kids into college and university. That's great. We have good higher education system in Ontario, one of the best in the world.
Yes.
You want to keep that up. Then you start looking at the trades, and there's just so much complication to get involved, get into the trade. Whereas if you want to go to college, you click on the Ontario College Application Service, one-stop shop. That's not true. The person who's interested in pursuing the trades has to talk to the ministry. There are multiple steps, 5 or 6 times they have to engage with the ministry. They have to find an employer. They have to get their employer on side. And even in one industry we talked about this morning, the electrical trades has over 9,000 employers. So that means you have to sort of find, get, and do that all on your own.
Yes.
And the places where you would expect the help to be, whether it's colleges or other high schools saying we're going to focus entirely on that, it's not there. It's always on the side of someone's desk. So where could we go? So let's take an example of the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program, which is a great program. One of the few instances in the K-12 environment in later years of 11 and 12, where somebody can study at high school, get credit for that, as well as get credit for their, but even
start to build towards
their apprenticeship, towards the completion of their certificate, which, as you say, is one of the things that leads to those better labor market outcomes for them. Challenge is, the OYAP program is often on the side of everyone's desk. We mentioned it earlier. You mentioned it that there are 2 OYAP coordinators for the Toronto District School Board. It's a massive school board in Ontario's, Canada's largest city. That is so far removed from the way we deal with colleges and universities. So to do that, and also the funding of it is not certain. It doesn't come on a regular basis. We had that discussion as well. That's an example of the way if we consolidated the entrance, the program, if we consolidated the funding, made it regular, clear, and provided pathways in the schools themselves and the attention and really staff time and attention that it needs from a provincial level rather than the dissipated level, you would, I think, see much better results.
And this is just one example of what we can do to start to correct for the system's present bias, conscious or unconscious, that pushes students into university and college or neglects them altogether. And so here's hoping that the Ontario government reads your analysis on this particular question as well as the paper's overall analysis and recommendations. I think if they do, we'll start to move the system in the structural direction that you're talking about. Thank you, viewers, for being part of the conversation today and over the past several weeks. Brian, thanks for your contribution and look forward to the conversation continuing.
Thank you, Sean.